On this week's episode of Comics and Controllers, we talk about how Disney is taking back the right of Star Wars comics from Dark Horse. And we also talk about a wedding, the wedding of everybody's favorite scabby Merc with the Mouth that's coming up. All that and more on this episode 4, Disney Strikes Back. Comics and Controllers. As always, I am Kyle, joined by my co-host, Steven.
How's it going?
It's going pretty good, Steven. So today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're not going to necessarily talk about one comic-related item and then move into a video game-related item. We're going to kind of talk about things, comic and video game-related stuff that meshes pretty well together. So to start off, some stuff's going on with Star Wars comics. Why don't you tell us about it, Steven?
As many people in the industry have predicted, eventually Disney now owning the rights to Star Wars and owning Marvel Comics, would eventually want to bring all of their eggs to one basket. And as it happens, the contract for the Star Wars comic license will run out in the end of 2014 or the beginning of 2015, and they have opted not to, re-sign that or anything. So Dark Horse Comics, who's been doing the Star Wars comics for about almost 20 years now, maybe 20 years full, they're going to be losing it, and that's very sad because, they've done a really good job with it. But as I said, this is something I think a lot of people saw coming.
Yeah, I mean, it does make a lot of sense that a powerhouse like Disney, that is one of the 7 corporate, media companies in the world that own so much stuff, owning Marvel Comics, would not want to basically give business to the enemy, which is Dark Horse.
Right.
And that's a pretty successful line for them, too. So, I mean, seems like you're probably taking a pretty big hit out of it.
Exactly. That's taking a chunk out of Dark Horse, but I don't think it's just giving money to the enemy. I'm sure that they're also thinking Dark Horse did a decent job with this, Star Wars name and all. But imagine what Disney could do with it, with having the movies, with having Marvel Comics and their advertising budget and their distribution levels.
Yeah, and Marvel can get bigger name people and stuff like that too.
Right. But
another thing too with Star Wars stuff in general is it's one of those fanboy kind of things that, like, it doesn't, to me, I don't think it really matters a lot who's writing it or drawing it or whatever. There are a group of people out there who will buy it regardless, as long as it somewhat fits within their purview of what that universe is supposed to be.
Right.
And that's probably what they're banking on, is that they might piss some people off, but majority of those people are still going to buy it anyways.
I think a great example of that is the new series that they're doing that's based off of the original script from Star Wars, where, before they went in and changed everything. In Lucas's original script, like, I think Han was a giant lizard person or something like that, and there was a bunch of changes, but they're writing a current Star Wars comic that's based more off of that world and that original setting, and people are still buying that. So that's a good example that, like you said, there is a core group of people that are going to buy almost anything with Star Wars on it, as long as they think it could be good.
Yeah. I mean, when I was younger, I was one of those people when it came to the books, like the post books in the universe where people were writing. And I mean, I don't really think any of them are considered canon. I mean, some of them might be because they do follow within the same universe, but some of those books were bad, bad. But I would read them because it was just Star Wars and I wanted something Star Wars, and that was all you could get. But see, now with these movies that Disney's talking about pumping one out, every couple of years. And it's also very convenient that this contract ends right at the place about where the first movie should come out.
Right. I do know that the movies supposedly are using some of the characters from the extended universe stuff, but I'm not familiar enough with the EU to say much more of what they're using. And I think you're right, it is very convenient, but from what I had heard, they're wanting to do a total of 6 movies. They're going to be doing 3 sequels and then 3 standalone movies. And if they, have it the way they want, I think you're going to actually be seeing a movie about every year to a year and a half coming out of there.
Yeah, that's what I was getting. I mean, it's not just movies either. There's other stuff they wanted to do, too. Like, I know there's some TV shows and other kind of things. I'm sure the comics are part of that, too. And I wouldn't even doubt if they try to rein in some of the books more and get more parts on that. Because, I mean, Disney didn't become this giant corporation that they are without understanding how to, make money and really use that type of stuff.
Right, and I agree with you. I think the comics, the books, everything will tie into these new movies and, cash in, and we'll see new toys and all that, the almighty dollar.
Video games.
Right, and video games, I'm pretty sure, and that scares me because Star Wars video games are not always good.
But, I mean, that's the thing, is they're not always good, but there have been some really good ones, like, I want to say Dark Jedi.
Dark Jedi series was pretty good.
Those are really good. And then I like Republic Commando. I know a lot of people didn't, but I thought it was amazing.
Oh, it was good. It was too short, and it really needed a sequel to finish out. They set up some really nice stuff at the end of that one, and it really needed a sequel. I personally liked Star Wars Shadows of the Empire for the N64. Yeah. Except for the sewer section, it was a great game.
Yeah, I know another series of Star Wars games that was great, and that people still are begging for a new one, is the Battlefront.
Oh yeah,
I remember playing those; they were so good. Battlefront 3, people are just hounding for another one. They've been hounding for years for it, and maybe Disney will do more. I mean, I know that when Disney took over, they canceled a lot of projects that were out there for Star Wars. Right. I mean, they canceled Clone Wars, which was a successful TV show.
Right. And supposedly there's going to be a little bit more of that's going to be coming out due to them already having some of it done before it was canceled. And a lot of people were really upset about them canceling Star Wars 1313, which was the bounty hunter game.
Oh, yeah.
Because it looked pretty decent from everything we had seen.
Yeah, it looked different. I think part of the problem with Star Wars games is that if you want to make it where it's always stuff with Jedi or following along, I mean, there's only so much you can do dealing with the original series.
Right.
So you've kind of got to go outside the box. And that's where a lot of the better ones, like Shadows of the Empire or the Dark Jedi series and Republic Commando and stuff like that, and Battlefront, is kind of where they come from, is that maybe they do kind of tie in with the original characters, the original universe stuff, but they still go outside of that and bring in some new aspect of it. Like maybe it's not everybody running around with lightsabers as Jedi. Maybe you're now a bounty hunter, or you're actually commandos in the Republic Army or something like that.
Right.
And I think it would have been a good game. It looked like it was going to be really good.
Right. I agree with that, and I will also say that I think one of the reasons why I like Shadows of the Empire so much, for 2 reasons. One, it was one of the few Star Wars books I actually read and really enjoyed. But also, 2, you got to play someone who was very similar to Han Solo, but wasn't Han Solo. And I think that was a good idea to kind of make this character where you could kind of get the same feeling, but you're not restricted by what you have to do to keep with the canon or what you have to do to keep true to this character. So I thought that was a good idea. Yeah,
I agree. And you still got to visit some of the famous places in the Star Wars universe, but it wasn't with, you didn't have to follow the typical story of what happened there in the movies and stuff like that.
Right. I also think that with this going, I know a lot of people are kind of upset, and I know, if I was working at Dark Horse currently, I would be scrambling to figure out what can replace something, like you said, that was probably a really good, solid moneymaker for them, even if it wasn't, printing money. I'm not even going to lie, I don't even know what else Dark Horse does. I know Dark Horse does release a lot of manga stuff, and manga has its, it has its money and has a following, but I don't know, they don't have the big stuff, because that's all with, Viz and things like that. Yeah, and Dark Horse has a lot of stuff, but a lot of their stuff is limited series. Like, they're working on The Strain in the fall, and they have several others that are good, but I don't think they're going to have anything that's going to come close to replacing this anytime soon, and they're probably going to have to scramble for a lot of new IPs or something similar. Yeah, I mean, Dark Horse, as an independent
want to say I want to call them independent, even though they're a pretty major comic company. But compared to
Right.
Marvel and DC, they basically are independent. But to be a smaller comic company, you have to either get lucky and latch on to something that's going to be consistent, so Star Wars contract, or you have to be willing to let people come in there, maybe some creators who are very well known and they want to do something that is not within the normal scope of Marvel or DC.
Right.
You got to be willing to let them come in there and just kind of go balls to the wall with whatever they want to write. I know Warren Ellis has done a lot with them and talk about balls to the wall stuff. I mean, he's one of those guys, like, he can write a superhero comic, but if you just tell him free reign, you're going to wind up with people with, like, catching STDs from spaceships and stuff like that in comics.
Right.
So
The problem is that doing that, if it's Warren Ellis, obviously you're like, okay, we can take a gamble on Warren Ellis, but if it's someone who's not even, who only has like one other comic under their belt or something like that, you're taking a risk by letting them just kind of do their own thing.
mm-hmm.
But that is the advantage of smaller companies. You usually do give your writers and creators a little bit more freedom. And I think that over time, Dark Horse is a strong company. They'll be fine. And it's not, again, I feel like I have to emphasize, they knew that this was going to eventually happen. Did they know it was going to happen now? If they're smart, they probably did. But, they knew it was eventually going to happen.
Yeah, like, we don't know what goes on in the back rooms of the two companies when discussing these kind of things, but I have a feeling that this is one of those contracts that was ending, and when it came down to contract negotiations, there probably weren't any.
Right.
Both companies probably knew it was about to end, and it's just the fans who were kind of surprised. Some of them were surprised by it. I don't know why people would be. It's a perfect business sense to me. Like, when you told me about it, Steven tells me, and I think my first question was, is it a contract ending, or are they revoking contract? And he said contract ending. I'm like, well, that's not okay. That makes perfect sense. It's within Disney's best business mind to do that. Now, if they were revoking a contract, that's a pretty jerk move. I wouldn't put it past Disney.
Right.
But they weren't doing that. So I was like, well, that's okay. I don't blame them.
And I don't know if you saw the press release, but not like I would expect nothing less than this. But in their press release, Marvel even said, Dark Horse has done a great job with these comics, but it's time for them to come home. It's not like they were like, hey, give us our shit back.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely understand that. It's one of those things, too, that you never know. Maybe they'll get some of the... I don't know how the contract's set up, so I don't know if maybe they still, as Star Wars franchise, are owned by DC, so maybe those comics can still move over to Marvel and keep going.
Yeah,
so
I'm
never
not sure.
know. So, I don't know. I've never really read those comics, so I'm not too sure on all that.
When you're talking about moving over, you're getting into a lot of like subcontract and stuff like that with like writers and all. So I don't know how all that's going to work. I'm sure that Marvel's going to want to kind of start clean, and I'm sure they're going to want to have, like you said, find the right creative team for it. So it depends. There's a lot of factors at play, and we have an entire year before we're even seeing really much of that. Yeah,
I don't know if the first Star Wars movie is this summer. No, it's got to be next summer because there's been no advertising. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's in 2015. And like I said, even with the comics, I think this is something that we're not going to get a lot of inside look at because, as we discussed, they're just going to say, hey, look, Marvel's doing this new Star Wars comic. You want to get in on this. And a lot of people are going to want to, try it out. So they're not going to have to, like with some other comics, show previews or, do too much to let you know what the story's about. They're just going to say, this is the creative team. This is kind of what we're dealing with, vague overview, and a lot of people are going to flock to it.
Well, it's the same thing, too. That reminds me of the books they do for when the movies come out. They'll always have, like, a novel tie-in, and it follows the movie, but there might be a little bit more kind of, like, there's a scene going on, and it's like maybe you'll get some background into what led up to a scene, stuff like that. And those books are usually written by fairly well-known writers within the sci-fi or fantasy world.
Right.
And I have a feeling a lot of that is whoever owns Star Wars at the time, so in this case Disney, will go to whatever book company is licensed to publish these books. So McGraw-Hill or Penguin or whoever has the rights to them. and they'll say, hey, we need a writer in this genre to write these books. And then that company will probably go to a writer and say, hey, you're very well known. This is what's going on. Here's a script. Write a movie or write a book very close to this script. And
Right.
of course you're going to take it because you know you're going to sell a lot and you're going to make a lot of money off of it because
Yeah.
it's Star Wars.
I'm a big fan of like people like Peter David and Timothy Zahn, and they do. You can find their names on a ton of movie tie-in stuff and different sci-fi tie-in stuff that, like you
Timothy
said,
Zahn also wrote probably the best Star Wars series ever,
Right,
the Heir to
yeah.
the Empire series. So if they put him on something, I'd probably end up having to read it.
right. And I agree with that. And like I said, you can find people like them. Those writers, their names are on all this stuff because, like you said, not only are they well-established writers, but they've delivered in that type of genre before, in like science fiction, in stuff like that. And even if they don't write an exact script adaptation, they'll tie it in somehow and with their own story. Yeah. So there's a lot of really good potential and stuff like that. And I think this was a good move, or not even, I won't even say a good move. I think this was the right move on Disney's part.
Yeah. As much as that may anger some folks, it was
Right.
most definitely
Yeah.
the right move on their part. Well, so that was one piece of kind of comic-related news that happened this past week. But there was another story that finally got some information that came out. So they'd been hinting in Marvel that there was going to be a dead wedding, is what they were building it up as, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
And they announced this week that what that was building up to is that in April, Deadpool is supposed to get married. To who, we're not sure yet.
Nope. No clue.
And it's being written by Jerry Dugan, who I think's been on Deadpool for a bit now, and then Brian Posehn, who is a comedian writer. He might... I didn't know who he was until I saw a picture of him, and he's probably the same way with most people. Like, once you see his picture, like, oh, that
guy.
But, I don't really know what to think about this. Because first off, it's coming out in April.
Most people
So-
know him from Sarah Silverman's show and Mission Hill and stuff like that. And yeah,
Yeah.
my first thought when I saw it's released in April, and somebody else mentioned it too, this all could be a giant April Fool's joke. It's the Deadpool comic. For all we know, he could actually be marrying the reader, and it just wouldn't surprise me. I don't know if I'm actually excited about this or not.
Yeah, because he breaks the fourth wall pretty
A
consistently.
lot, yeah. Depending on who's writing it, he will sometimes keep it to a minimum, and I haven't read much of... I think I've only read one of Dugan's actual Deadpool comics. I do want to read Deadpool Kills Deadpool, because that's supposed to be very good, but a lot of people are really thinking it might be Death. They have a history. Death has kind of been getting pulled back and forth between Deadpool and Thanos, and Death has some odd attraction to Deadpool, I guess because he can't die.
Is she like... Because I always know that Thanos has always had a thing for death.
Right.
Is it one of those things where it's like maybe Thanos is the well-to-do guy, the very powerful person, while Death is a very powerful person, so they should technically they'd be a better coupling. But she wants Deadpool because he's that gritty bad boy who she can't quite get her hands around, but she just wants him because of that. It makes him that much more desirable.
That, and Deadpool's probably the one who makes her laugh, and we all know that's important.
Possibly.
Okay.
He's got to make somebody laugh.
He's got to make
It
somebody
sure
laugh, exactly.
It ain't me. I'll say that.
Our opinions on Deadpool are probably left for a discussion better left for another day. But
That's probably a whole podcast of its own. Our thoughts on him and characters like him.
I think the important part to take away from this is that they had been working on this idea for a while. This isn't a spur of the moment thing. This is something Dugan was saying that he's been wanting to do for a little while. And at first they were going to keep it kind of subtle, and then they decided no, that wasn't appropriate. That wasn't going to fit the character, so they're making this big deal out of it. And I hope that makes me unfortunately think even more that this is going to be kind of a letdown. But I'll be interested to see what happens.
Yeah, I kind of have a sneaking suspicion it's a build up to a giant troll.
I'm pretty sure you're not. If that's not exact, you're not far from the truth. Or
if it was Mark Millar, I'd put money on it being a giant troll, because he trolls the reader constantly.
Right.
In press. He'll say stuff and get people so worked up over it.
Yeah.
And then, like, when it comes out, it's nothing like he has said it's going to be. Like, he does it because he knows it's going to make comics sell.
Right.
So,
I honestly, I don't read enough Deadpool that even if they do kind of a real quote-unquote wedding, and they actually marry him off to someone who's not Death and someone who's not, a gag like the Reader, I don't know enough of the side characters in there. I mean, I know he and Domino technically dated for a little while, and there's this picture you can see online of all these people there at the wedding that are people he's had a past with. But if it's like some random side character, I'm not even going to know who it is.
Yeah, I was trying to think of what would be a good troll character to marry him to, like, and I thought maybe a lot of people probably don't even remember this character. So there's a female version of MODOK. Her name is Modam.
Yeah,
they should have him marry Modam.
That would be pretty funny, actually.
Because that would be pretty ridiculous. Because she's basically, she's like MODOK with breasts.
Yeah.
And it's very subtle. Like, you could easily confuse the two. It could be MODOK in drag for all you know.
Right. Actually, that's very similar to what I was going to say, which was watch it just be a blow-up doll. But
yeah. Well, I remember in the very first Deadpool comic, he had, like, a clone Mary Jane Watson he had gotten from, like, Arnim Zola.
Yes.
Now, that would have been hilarious. That would be actually pretty hilarious if he married, like, a clone Mary Jane or Gwen Stacy or Jean Grey or somebody like that. Right. I don't know. But
I would actually find that pretty funny.
But I know you mentioned Death and they have a past. Some of that past was revealed in the video game, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they've done a lot in the comics, but the video game that, recently came out touched up on that a lot. And I thought they did a good job with that. It actually made me feel like the two had an actual connection, and, it was more than just something goofy to do. I feel kind of bad for Deadpool in his video game because, Marvel ended a lot of their licensing stuff recently for video games, which had Deadpool removed from Steam, Xbox Live, and the PlayStation Network after only being out on those networks for about 6 to 7 months.
Yeah, that's really short. On a digital market, most games stay out almost permanently now.
Yeah, I hope
digital markets.
I hope everyone bought their copy of X-Men Arcade, because that is probably one of the best comic book to video game adaptations. But that one's gone. The Marvel vs. Capcom series, I believe, is all going to be gone, or at least I know they're removing 1 and 2.
Yeah, I think those original ones. I think the new ones are remaining.
Right. So that really stinks.
Is this another one of those things where their contract ended, or is there more to it, or do we not know?
Yeah, from what I read, the contracts came to an end, and normally they would renegotiate, and maybe they did. I'm not sure, but either it could be a number of things. Marvel might have asked for more money. They may have wanted to pull their contracts to see if they could find a new business deal to go through to make even more money. They may be revamping everything. Who knows? They may. A lot of people think they're just holding out. What they want to do is they want to drop the market for a little bit on their games, and then see if they can get, more money out of these companies. And I think that's kind of crappy for them to do, especially if somebody wants to buy these things. But it's their stuff. And again, they didn't do anything really underhanded. They just let their contracts expire.
Yeah, and see, okay, so this is one of my thoughts on this kind of thing, is that it sucks for a consumer or a reader or a viewer when companies do this. They pull stuff away from where it's out there like that.
Right.
That's from, our view. It's terrible, and it makes you angry because you're like, why are you doing this? I want to read about this character. I want to play this video game with this character, but now I can't get it in an easy manner. And a lot of times what that does is it spurs piracy and things along those lines. Like, if you can't download Deadpool and you don't live somewhere where you can buy it, well, I guess I'll just go download it.
Yeah, and a lot of people are like, well, you can still go buy the game on disc, but, I see some of the opposition, and I agree with you to a limit, to a degree on that. I think it will inspire that.
But see, I also think about it from the perspective of the companies. And one of the things that it comes down to in the genre of characters and logos and things like that is that's intellectual property, and you have to fight for it to keep it. And so if, say, Marvel let somebody just use the Hulk willy-nilly in something and they didn't fight it, that almost shows that they don't really have a concern or a care for that character. So if somebody else later on wanted to use it and it went to court, somebody could use it as an argument against them in court for that character. Say, well, look, they didn't fight it with this, and this was pretty big. It made money, so they must not really have a concern for this character.
Right.
So I can understand their need to kind of show that, no, this is important, we're going to pull it back. And there are still some of these Marvel games out there, like Lego Marvel's still out there. I actually just downloaded it. It's pretty good.
I actually want to try that one. I haven't had a chance yet.
It's amazingly fun. I actually bought a physical copy of it to go play with somebody on New Year's, and I left it with her because I don't have a 360 anymore. And so when I got back, I was like, well, I want to play it through because there's like probably almost 170-something characters in the game. And not like, there are some of those like AIM soldier, FBI agent, SHIELD agent, a few of those. But there are characters in there that I was like, huh? I haven't seen this guy in a comic in like 10 years. What is he doing in this video game?
Nice. I definitely will end up picking that one up.
But yeah, I understand why companies do stuff like this. Why they kind of... And another thing is that this is coming from Marvel, who's part of part of Disney, I'm sorry. Perhaps Disney is trying to pull a lot of this stuff back because maybe they're trying to go more in-house. Maybe with their purchase of all this LucasArts stuff, they're like, well, we got these people that can make video games. Why don't we just make them ourselves?
I mean, that, of course. And who knows? Like I said, I'm not going to try to take too much of a guess on that one because there could be a lot going on, like you said earlier, in the offices that we're not aware of. Mm-hmm. They may be building up for something much bigger. Like you said, maybe they're going to design their own new studio. We don't know.
True. They could be building up because of a kind of crisis. A crisis on infinite platforms. But, I mean, hopefully the best thing that can come out of this is that if they take all these games or these properties and bring them in-house, like they try to do, like Marvel's doing this with the movies.
Yeah.
And I hold out that I think this is part of the reason that they're trying to do some Fantastic Four movie again, is because they know if they don't, they lose the rights to the company that has the rights to Fantastic Four will lose those rights.
Did you ever play the PS1 Fantastic Four video game?
No. I don't like the Fantastic Four enough to want anything to do with it.
I don't know many people who do like the Fantastic Four, but it was, there are a lot of movies that their video game tie-ins are bad, and there are a lot of bad movies that have bad video game tie-ins, but I would actually venture that that's one of the worst, is that Fantastic Four PS1 game. It was horrible. I
used to think a lot of that type of stuff, video games and movies, especially when it comes to some studio, whether it's a movie studio or a video game studio, owning the rights to a franchise, there's usually time frames on it. Like, you need to produce these games in this amount of time. If you don't, or we can prove that you haven't made reasonable effort within this, we can revoke a contract or pull it back. Mm-hmm. And Fox did it once before with the Fantastic Four, and they had that basically B movie they made.
Right.
And then they actually made 2 real movies, which, take it or leave it. They were Fantastic Four, whether you liked it or not. And then that's been years, though. That's easily been almost 10 years since they've done that. And they're talking about this other Fantastic Four movie, which leads me to believe it's the whole, we need to put this in some kind of franchise. Hey, because what is it, Fantastic Four X-Men, what they were going to do?
I think that got I think that got debunked.
Okay.
I think they're saying that was just a rumor now, but it wouldn't surprise me. Originally, it was supposed to be a crossover between X-Men and Fantastic Four, and I'm really hoping they don't do that, because I like X-Men too much to have to suffer through Fantastic Four.
Yeah, a lot of that, too, would be like, hey, listen, we got this one franchise that doesn't make as much money. We got to make something in it or we're going to lose it. But we got another franchise that people love. Maybe if we cross them over, we can try to convince people they like the other one.
Exactly. I'll say, so the B movie that you originally mentioned, that was the 90s Fantastic Four movie, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I've still never seen this thing. But
you don't need to.
I've heard it's like the worst thing out there. And I'm very tempted to watch it one day just because I feel like I need to know, as a as a scientist doing a study. I need to have all the information.
Have you ever seen the Gen X television pilot?
Yes, and I will sadly admit that I actually really enjoyed it.
Okay. Well, then maybe you would like that Fantastic Four movie from the 90s,
that's-
because I was going to say that Gen X thing is better than that.
Yeah.
So if you said it was bad, I mean, you would hate it, but
No, I
maybe
liked
you will.
the Gen X comics. The Generation X comics were some of my favorite, and I don't think the movie did the comics really justice, but I thought it was entertaining.
Yeah.
I'll put it to you this way. The two Fantastic Four movies, the more recent ones, I thought the first one was not horrible. There were a lot of parts I didn't like. There were things that I thought could have been much better. And maybe seeing the second Fantastic Four movie is what really cemented that, because that second one was just wretched. Like, I left the theater and I was like, whatever, like hour and 40, 45 minutes, whatever, I would really like that back. I could have done anything else.
So let me tell you my experience with those movies. The
All
first
right.
one I thought was okay on its own.
Yeah,
that's
it's
not
all
bad.
right.
Second one I saw on a plane trip coming back from Vegas. So literally there was nothing else to do except for watch this movie. And I did watch it. I didn't listen to anything else. I watched the movie. I don't remember anything about it. That's how bad it was.
You don't remember?
All I remember was Silver Surfer.
Right.
That's it.
Lawrence
and I don't remember
Fishburne.
anything else.
As the Silver Surfer.
I didn't even remember that. I just remembered it was a Silver Surfer. I remember he did something where, like, he was basically like the T-2000 from Terminator, because he was like liquid metal because he could do stuff. That's all I remembered.
Do you remember how Galactus looked at the end?
I remembered he didn't look like Galactus.
Right. A lot of people were really put off by that.
I know people were like, I remember two arguments on that. One was like, I mean, how realistic would a giant guy flying through outer space be? I was like, how realistic would a guy on a silver surfboard flying through outer space be? Shut your mouth. This is a comic book. It doesn't have to be realistic.
Exactly.
Follow the stupid story. There's very few times when major stuff like that I think has been changed I was okay with. Like when in Watchmen, I was okay with the change to that ending.
Right, yeah.
In the movie. I really felt it was, man, people are going to crucify me. I felt it was better than the original one. Like, oh, what are we going to do? We're going to summon some giant Cthulhu creature from another dimension. When it shows up, its psychic powers are going to kill everybody. That's retarded. Okay? That's straight stupid. No, instead we're going to cause some kind of atomic blast that looks like Mr. Manhattan or Dr. Manhattan did it. Yeah. That makes a lot more sense.
I think people are going to crucify you more for calling him Mr. Manhattan. But
well, that was a slip, yeah.
But no,
there's so many misters and doctors, it's hard to keep them all separate.
No, I agree with you. I think the comic ending worked really well for the comic and for the 80s. And I think had they tried to do that exact ending in the movie, the fanboys, the hardcore fanboys might have been okay with it. But the majority of audiences would have thought that was the stupidest thing ever. And I liked the ending of the movie.
I did too. I mean, I know a lot of people who like, mostly fanboys who are like, the movie was pretty good until the end, and that ruined it, and I hate it because of that. I'm like, why? Does it even matter? That movie was still good.
The worst part about that movie was the soundtrack. That's the truth.
Yeah, it was kind of awkward at times. I mean, it grew on me, but it was weirdly done. But I guess it was just trying to capture the feel and the time and the era.
It was trying to capture the time, and those were all good songs. But there were just a couple of parts where I'm like, why is this song playing right at this moment?
It still doesn't beat, like, The Matrix 2, we're in the post-apocalyptic universe. Let's have a rave dance party. 10,000 feet underground.
Look, man, when you think the machines are coming to kill you, you gotta rave.
Rave out, man. Just don't hold back. But yeah, I think getting back to what we were talking about with the characters and stuff like that, I think a lot of this stuff with Marvel and DC and Disney, I keep wanting to say DC.
Yeah.
Because I hear Marvel, I automatically think Marvel DC.
Right.
But no, Marvel and Disney is that. A lot of it is showing that the Star Wars, I kind of feel like a lot of it's bullying almost. Not in a bad way, but showing like, hey, this is our property. And people have hoarded out for so long. Like George Lucas was just basically like pimping out, Vader on street corners for money for all these years. We're not going to do that. We want to actually control the property, which is how you should be. So they're going to rein it in. So I could see them keeping it all in-house video games with it, in-house comics with it, probably even having a lot of control over the book side of it.
I think you're the first person who has classified Vader as the prostitute and not the pimp himself. All right, go ahead.
Well, I mean, under George Lucas.
Right, yeah.
But, I think that, and then I can see maybe with Marvel they're trying to do the same thing. There's some of these Marvel characters and places and things like that with the video games. And there have been some of those are so bad. And they're like, listen, you're basically blemishing our property when you're like, hey, let's make this game. We'll give you all this money so we can make this is DC, I know, but like, we'll make Superman 64. Worst game ever. I mean, because of that, I don't think there's been another Superman game except for one that tied into the movie.
Right. I'll put it this way. When I had, back in the day, I had my N64, loved it. I remember seeing the ads for Superman 64, and I think I had, blinders on, because I was like, this game's going to be awesome. And I ended up not getting it until a while after it had been out, but I hadn't heard all the things about it. So I popped
before the internet.
I popped that thing in the system. I'm like, this is going to be great. And that's got to be one of my worst gaming experiences ever. Yeah, a game's bad when, like, as a kid. Like, when you're a kid and you got a game, it could be the worst game ever, but it was a new game. Yeah, and so you were happy. You will try to make that game.
And you'll still beat it. Like, I mean, I'm video gaming Dark Secrets. I mean, I remember playing all the way through the Home Alone video game and Beavis and Butthead the video game multiple times.
I think I beat Home Alone. I never played Beavis and Butthead, though.
And they weren't, like, long games, but it was just, as a kid, you didn't have a lot of games, so you just played what you had, and you played the hell out of it until you were amazing at it.
Exactly.
But that is one of those games that, even as a kid, you recognize this game is terrible.
Yeah. I gotta say this. I think it was worse when we were younger, and I think part of that has to do with LJN. Do you know who LJN is?
No.
Okay, they're a company that made a ton of the movie tie-in games for the SNES and a few other consoles, but mostly for NES and SNES. Okay. But they did, like, if you remember the Jaws game. Are you familiar with that one?
The Jaws game? Oh, yeah, because that game was like you would have to get, like, tracking devices in Jaws and hunt them down and stuff.
Oh, it was horrible. But
it was bad.
They did, like, all the Back to the Future games. They did, a lot of, like, the Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street. They had so many back. The Karate Kid game, if you remember that one. There's a ton. Yes,
I remember you had to... The mini games
right.
of catching flies
right.
and breaking ice or whatever.
They did the Who Framed Roger Rabbit game, which was supposed to be pretty bad.
So basically,
Wolverine game.
This company, their whole job was to make crappy franchises of movies and comics and whatever.
Yeah.
They probably got paid big money to do it, and they made these cheap little games.
Yeah, they had very few original games, and the only games that I actually remember, the SNES Spider-Man games that they did were pretty good. And then I remember there was like one Punisher game that they did was okay, but pretty much the rest of their catalog was just wretched.
And see, that's the reason that these companies have to fight for their properties, because otherwise you get these guys who, oh yeah, man, I'll make this amazing game for you. It'll only be $1 million. They put 10,000 in. You're just like, here you go. You end up with Superman 64 E.T.
That's what I think they did with Aquaman Battle for Atlantis. It was on the GameCube, I think. But I remember that they're like, the best part of this game is the animation for Aquaman's hair. And I thought, oh, well, that's just being a little harsh. And then I watched some gameplay of it, and I was like, nope, maybe it's not. Never mind.
Yeah, I remember when I worked at a GameStop, that game came in. And I remember that was one of those games that came in a box that just was a box of games. Like, it wasn't like, oh my god, these are all the Maddens, go block them up in the back until they come out.
Right.
It was just like, put it out whenever it comes out because no one cares. I remember opening it and being like, I've never even heard of this game. I didn't even know they were making an Aquaman game. And I remember putting it in the GameCube. Yeah, exactly. I remember putting it in the GameCube in the store, and for about 5 minutes I was just like, yeah, no one's going to buy this game. If they try to, I'm going to be like, you probably shouldn't buy that game. And I don't think I ever sold a single copy of it.
You probably didn't. The only people I know who own copies just bought it for dirt cheap after they heard about how bad it was.
I can see that, yeah.
There's a lot of, like, DC has a lot of really bad games. Superman 64, as we mentioned, the Aquaman game. Do you remember the Catwoman game?
No.
Okay, so the Halle Berry...
oh my god.
The Halle Berry Catwoman movie came out, and they're like, we're finally going to do a Catwoman game. And I'll admit, for 5 seconds I was excited, because I like the character of Catwoman. And I was like, cool, they're going to do kind of a beat-em-up Catwoman-style game. No, that is not what happened.
See, DC is the example of what happens when you don't give a damn about your franchises. And you're just like, sure, just give me money, do whatever you want with it. Yeah, I don't care. Keep making these games. People don't buy those games. They know they're bad. I mean, name one single good DC video game. DC character-based video game.
I can only name one. On the
Injustice?
No, okay, I can name two.
Injustice is the one that I think of, and that's the newer one.
Okay, I'll say two. Well, first of all, I like Batman Arkham Asylum and Arkham City.
Okay, I'll give you a set. Okay, let me go ahead and say this. Before the current generation, well, DC's learned because Time Warner basically just slapped him in the face and told him to stop doing that.
That's
before the current generation.
Right, that's what I was going to say. Before the 360 and the PS3 or the new stuff, the Batman animated series game on SNES was really good.
Never played it.
It was all based off characters from the cartoon. It was a very standard, basic game. You had your basic Batman stuff, but the storyline was they had some people who were working on the show give them ideas and stuff for the storyline. So it was really nice. Like, it was probably the one DC game that didn't suck.
That's good. They actually had people who understood the franchise, helped them work with it. And I think that's the difference in a lot of the current stuff from DC is when they do these games, these big games, they actually usually have someone who knows stuff about the Batman universe writing or helping them write stuff. So people who are big comic book fans, not just some random dude who it's like, you work for this company, we need you to make this game. It's like, Aquaman, he's got fish powers or something, right? I don't know. Put him in the water, swimming.
Right.
Make sure his hair looks good, though, because hair underwater is something we haven't been working on well. I think we need to put $1 million of our $1.5 million budget into underwater hair.
If Dead or Alive can get away with putting that much money into boob physics, we can put it into hair.
Yeah, but the difference is that it's still a good game.
Right.
That's what I always say. I always say this when I tell people I like Dead or Alive, and it's a female. They're like, "Oh, I know why you like that." I'm like, "I like it because it's a good game. It helps, that there's really good physics in that game."
Do you have that defense if you say I like Dead or Alive Extreme Volleyball? Cause
I don't talk about that game. Like, they don't need to know that game exists.
Right.
Which it's still actually a fun game.
I've never played though. I've never played.
Oh man.
Someone loaned me a copy of the Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball. I put it in my system. I was like, I know jack crap about volleyball, but I'll try it. And I played maybe 5 minutes of it, and I was like, well, I'm done.
It basically, to me, the best way to describe that game is like, it's a game that has characters from a game that's really good and popular, but it's just a mini game, and it's just a time waster.
It is a mini game that they figured that they could, put out as its own thing.
I played it. It wasn't something where I was just like, this is the greatest game ever. But I remember playing it just because I could check games out when I worked at GameStop.
Right.
A little known fact, for those of you who don't know anybody who's ever worked there, is that GameStop employees can actually check games out as like the only benefit of working there. So you can check a game out to try it before you buy it. And I used to do that all the time. So I would try games that I never would have bought just to see what they were. And every now and then you stumble across an amazing game. 9 times out of 10, though, there's a reason that it's still sitting on the shelf and never been purchased after a year.
Yeah.
So
I'll put it this way. I know we're bashing on DC for their games a lot, but let me ask you just a couple quick ones. Do you remember the Fight Club game?
I remember when it came out, and I remember being such a huge fan of the book and the movie, and I saw that, and I'm like, this infuriates me, and I would not let people buy it. I would tell them how bad it was and that it was not worth their effort. I'd show them to a good fighting game.
Right. I just remember that they sent out apparently some early copies of that game to get people, hyped up and talking about it. And I never saw a positive comment about that game at all. Same thing with the Charlie's Angels game. I'm not a big Charlie's Angels fan, but I remember them talking about how bad that game was.
I didn't even know they made a game for that.
Yeah. My favorite when I was a kid was the Cliffhanger game. I played Cliffhanger, and then, as we were talking about earlier, as a kid, you kind of just have to. It's like, well, I rented this for the weekend. I'm going to make the most of it.
Yeah.
And then I got older and I, replayed it a little bit, and I'm like, this game's pretty bad.
Yeah. I mean, that, like I said, it goes back to the whole protect your franchise. But for, Cliffhanger's not really a franchise because, I think they made a second one.
I don't think they did they?
Maybe not. I don't know.
I only remember the one.
A lot of those movie games like that, especially back in the day, it was just like, hey, listen, this movie's probably not going to be a block office buster. It's probably going to make enough to pay the bills, but we need to get some like other property out there for it. Why not just make a video game? And back in the day, it was easy to crap out one of those video games on an NES or an SNES. I mean, a lot easier than it probably is now.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, they made some good ones like Aladdin, The Lion King. I know both those are Disney games, but they were amazing.
No.
Spider-Man
because they were
2,
platformers.
Yeah, they were platformers. They're easy mechanics, but it was fun, and it incorporated all these characters that you knew from the movie, so it felt, I think, like you were saying earlier, I think they got some people who either helped with the movies or knew the movies really well to work on them.
Mm-hmm. And Spider-Man 2, I know you mentioned that. That was another one. I remember when it came out, that's probably the only video game based on a movie I think I've ever played all the way through.
Dude, for an open world Spider-Man game to me sounds awesome even now if they did it correctly. I haven't played the newest one, the one that's based off the new Spider-Man movie, but I heard it was okay. But that Spider-Man in an open world game is awesome. I love that idea. Also,
then there's the classic. Well, the classic game that everybody knows from your N64 days, and you hated your friends because of it.
Oh, GoldenEye, right?
GoldenEye. Yeah. That's probably one of the best. But see, here's the thing: is that like when you talk to people about GoldenEye, it's not, oh yeah, man, it was really good tie into the movie. It was like that multiplayer was what we played. And that was so amazing.
I loved the single player too, but yeah, I actually was pretty decent at GoldenEye. I'm not great at most first person shooters. I just, me personally, I'm just not good at them, but I was good at GoldenEye because I played that a lot. I played the hell out of some GoldenEye.
Yeah.
Did you play the Riddick one? I think it's called like Escape from Butcher Bay.
No, I remember it. Everybody said it was really good, but I never played it because I've never watched any of the movies either. So
okay, well, it came out after the first movie, and one of the things I really liked about it was they didn't even attempt to like just recreate the movie in the game. They either, I can't remember if it takes place before or after, but it's actually him pretty much escaping from prison. And it was an first Xbox console game that had great mechanics. The voice acting wasn't bad. I mean, it was a good game, and it was a surprise.
Yeah, I remember people talking about it and really digging it, but I never did. Mostly because I was like, well, I've never really watched the movies, so I don't really know anything about it. So I didn't think I would get into it as much.
Yeah. I also, I think it was Volition that did it. They did a Punisher game for the original Xbox that was really good.
Yeah.
And one thing about it is that they didn't tie it into the movie as much as they just used some of the characters from the movie. But
yes.
It was good.
I remember that game. That was really good. That was a great one.
Do you remember the executions from that where you could...
That's what made it so good.
Yeah.
Like, the game itself was just generic shooter.
Right.
Third-person shooter. But it was the executions that you could pull off on people, like dumping them in piranha tanks or hanging them from buildings or whatever. Just craziness.
Yeah. It also used some of my favorite Punisher villains, like Monucci and the Bushwhacker. Mm-hmm. Great. It was fun.
It was a good tie-in. It kind of tried to tie the Welcome Back Frank comic, and it also tried to tie the movies to a single universe.
Yeah.
So, I thought it worked fairly well, and it was a good game. I mean, it was nothing like, oh man, groundbreaking,
right, yeah.
But it was really fun to play.
Now that you say that, trying to tie the comic book universe into the movie universe, I'm amazed it didn't suck more, because that would have been hard to do, but it was a lot of fun. They even incorporated other Marvel characters in there. There's a stage where Iron Man shows up.
Oh, I didn't even remember that.
Yeah, at one point you have to go to Stark Industries.
Oh, okay,
and he shows up, yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that now.
So there are good comic book and movie game tie-ins, but there are many more bad ones.
Yeah, but most of them are within the last generation. That earlier generation, it was not so much. Like, it was... I think that's also, though, just to kind of tie things up, though, you can see that people now recognize the importance in allowing people to have that kind of access to your characters. It used to be, it's just another way to make some quick money. Video games are not really a big deal. Who really cares? Now it's like, oh no, they're a big deal, because if these do well, we could have another whole line of money-making products out there, along with the movies, along with the comics, along with the books. So people are a lot more... careful with what they've got out
Right.
there.
I also think a lot of video game developers, and not just for movie tie-ins and stuff like that, are realizing that if we make a good game, we have a chance of making a franchise, and franchises make a lot more money than standalone games.
Yep, I agree completely. Well, I think that's going to about do it for this episode of Comics and Controllers. So if you want to send us anything to talk about or ask us any questions, you can email us at comicsandcontrollers@gmail.com. If you want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter at ZombieJesus here. Where can they follow you at, Stephen?
On Twitter as well, at Stephen Wilds.
All right. So until next time, I'm Kyle.
I'm Stephen. Y'all have a good one.